Hey everybody, welcome to the latest video here on Hidden Machine. We are back again with another video where we're going to look at some of your questions that you sent in after completing Alan Wake 2. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions the first time. We got way more than I thought we would, which is why I'm doing this follow-up with some new folks. And I do want to thank our supporters over on Patreon. They sent in some questions as well. The list of supporters are here on the screen. If you want to join this list and help the channel do what it does, there's a link down below. You can check it out. But in the meantime, let's get into the meat of today's video, the discussion on Alan Wake 2 and your questions regarding various aspects of it. I have two guests today. Nick, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name's Nick and I'm from a channel called Deep Dives. I do long-form discussion videos, currently mostly on horror games, but otherwise pretty much everything.
Cool, and Cookies?
Hey there, it's Cookies from Cookies and Cream, your one-stop shop for seeing what it means to game with a purpose, predominantly focusing on horror gaming as well as whatever good that comes out.
Two channels I really enjoy. Cool to have everybody here on the channel. So you both have played through Alan Wake 2, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure you guys both have some of your own questions. I'd like to kind of maybe get into some of those in a minute, but just to get right into it and kick it off, we have a question from a user named Rocketman who is asking, how could the Cult of the Tree understand that the clicker they found was an OOP, and how did they know how to use it, rather than just discarding it as garbage? This is something I didn't really consider. Have either of you given any thought to, how the cult knew to use the clicker?
Well, that's the tough part because, predominantly it's shown that with, Yako, the cult itself is really disorganized. So it's one of those things where, what was their level of awareness with Cauldron Lake? If something were to have come out, regardless, you're going to manifest that and keep it in some respect, Yeah,
there's still so much yet that's not understood about, the events leading up to it and the surrounding events. I'm pretty sure, I could be misremembering here, but they've been finding pages, right, of Alan's writing and using that to go by informing the cult. Who's to say they didn't find pages detailing objects of power? There could have been mention of it there. Obviously, nothing's been discovered yet, but it's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I feel like, right now I'm having fun kind of just asking questions more than anything and kind of just pondering those questions. I thought on my second playthrough, which I'm in the middle of right now, I thought I'd maybe figure out a bit more, but I'm realizing as I play, I'm just trying to figure out which questions I even want to ask because there's so much still left open in terms of, loose ends and things that I believe will be addressed further in the New Game Plus. But there also was some evidence that the Cult of the Tree folks were aware of the FBC and, aware of being monitored. They found some of their documents. So it's also possible that some of their, even though everything that the FBC writes is generally, vague and clinical and often redacted, they could have gotten some sort of insight from those documents as well, depending on what was revealed. I don't even know if the FBC was aware of the clicker as an object of power.
I think they were. Because, they mentioned... I'm sure they mentioned it during the game. Once again, that so much happens, it's hard to pinpoint details a lot of the time, but even the Cult of the Tree's logo, so to speak, is based off of the Federal Bureau of Control's own symbols, if you will. So
I just actually finished my second playthrough, and I forget where it was, but there was a specific manuscript page where it referenced that the symbol of the FBC was seen by a member of the cult. I don't think it was Yako. I think it was his brother, and then who calls a cult, right? They just took the idea and just kind of ran with it.
Yeah, I am having memory of that. There's also there's a file folder where you can see that one of them was sketching different versions of the logo and stuff, and on that file folder was the FBC logo as well. And this is just kind of my own hearsay, but there is the scene in the AWE expansion for Control where I think it's in the backwards lyrics to Take Control. There is a clue that leads to an Easter egg that you can find in AWE, but part of the backwards lyrics mentions like something like in a drunken, fevered state, they see like the pyramid and the stone file and it becomes a spruce tree, which I feel like is a nod to the creation of the cult of the tree. I'm not positive about that, but it feels that way.
No, I think you're onto something there. There's a ton of foreshadowing in earlier games. The term AWE, for instance, goes back all the way to 2012. And in some random online blog post. So it's clear that Remedy have had these ideas for a long time and are slowly weaving them, into each story.
I would love to see the chalkboard or the whiteboard they use to like keep everything on track and like in order, because that alone has to be like 10 full-time jobs right there.
One of the devs at one point did mention that they've been building like an internal wiki that they use to like cross-reference everything.
Now that wiki I want access to.
Yeah, I would would love to see that. This is something also just to maybe chew on. I know that Alan Wake 2 was in production at some point during the development of Control. Like it was at least confirmed, and they knew they wanted to start to build those connections. And there is like other explicit reference to the Cult of the Tree in Control, and so like those ideas were definitely, they were intentionally there as a direct lead-in to the sequel. But knowing that, it kind of like makes me wonder if the old gods of Asgard are writing about the Cult of the Tree, and we know that they have their history with their own art affecting reality and causing AWEs. It does make me wonder if they're in some way responsible for the cult, having written about it supposedly maybe before Alan was writing about it. Depending on when that song Take Control was, in the timeline of the game, like when that was written, whose idea was it first? Were they influenced by visions that they received, or was Alan and the whole cult thing influenced by the old gods? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
It brings up a good point. So like, not to get too far ahead, but like that final scene where Alan quotes that like, hey, it's not a loop, it's a spiral. I always looked at that like kind of a little more symbolically, like the whole reason the spiral continues is because you don't have a beginning point or an end point. And like with all these realities that are kind of starting to overlap, like it's just like a train that has derailed so much that it's hard to like, whoever is going to eventually solve this puzzle, if it ever does get solved, is going to be the one that basically makes it like, look, this is where it began and this is where it's going to end. Unless it's like a full circle loop itself where you just connect both points of the spiral, but that, I mean, like it creates another spiral.
That's a very fair point. I do feel like they are creating a scenario where finding a definitive start and end point is becoming more and more irrelevant and impossible to a degree with all the sort of time manipulation aspects that have been introduced in Alan Wake 2 that I don't think were as apparent in the first game. But I want to move on to a second question here. Does anyone else have any other insights on that topic before we move on?
Not without spending another hour possibly talking about it.
I hear you. So Warren Blythe messaged and asked, I noticed the single blessed moving box in Alice's final empty apartment, and Barry's email about joining the Blessed cult in LA. Is Chester Blessed expected to be an antagonist of Control 2, or possibly more just the Blessed organization? Just curious if there's any other details here to chew on. This is purely a speculative thing, but I think it's very interesting that we got some vague ideas about the Blessed. The FBC categorizes them as a paracriminal organization, but seeing how they treated Alan, he's also seen as a paracriminal, and they wanted to lock him up and everything, and maybe not paracriminal, but a hostile entity possibly that they just wanted to experiment on and lock up. So it does make me wonder, one, is the cult truly as antagonistic as we've been led to believe? And two, like, it's unclear like where and when we'll explore more of what they're doing. It does feel potentially grounds for them appearing to be a heavy presence in Control too, but it could also work for some sort of future Alan Wake adventure as well, now that Barry's tied to it. So I don't know. Do you either have any thoughts about this organization and how they might play into the bigger picture going forward?
I mean, if Remedy's doing the interconnected universe thing and they're kind of following like the video game footstep of like Marvel's cinematic universe, then I personally would expect Control 2 would probably bring them on quite a bit. I was expecting like more so like a dual antagonist kind of role where it's, they throw more than one storyline to kind of keep it fresh and interesting. I wouldn't be shocked if we get like a civil war where like, you have the FBC going against the Blessed Cult and maybe some, other factions that we probably haven't even like learned of yet.
I mean, anything's possible at this point, right? Whatever we think, I should imagine at the point of it coming to be, it will be tenfold and we'll have our minds blown once again. But no, I think it would be cool to see that them expanded upon. And sorry, you were going to say something.
No. I think you're totally spot on with just, they always go bigger than you think they will with a lot of these things. Like they gave us such a small glimpse of a possible future, and then when they actually give us the full narrative, it's expanded in ways we couldn't have ever imagined.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me ask you guys this, kind of like a piggyback question. So with like this interconnected universe, when I saw those emails from Barry, I mean, of course, like, my heart just got all warm and fuzzy on the inside. But if he's in like Control 2, like for whatever reason, he ends up playing a role, like how comfortable would you guys feel like if certain storylines in like certain of these characters, like say Barry and Alan Wake, do you feel like it's something that could like carry into a Control and like they could maybe tie off his story and finish it? Or do you feel like if it starts in that series, it needs to end in that series specifically?
I mean, at this point, you just need to look at it like the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. Anyone can turn up anywhere and have whatever stories they wish or whatever seems right at the time. If there's a good story with Barry, I'd like to see that. I really miss Barry not being in Alan Wake 2. I was really sad by it.
I want to see what he looks like now, because he was bragging. He's like, yeah, I lost all this weight. I do yoga. Like I'm at peace. I built a nursing home.
He's basically going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's what he's spent his time doing. He's been getting strong in the gym and he's ready to fight the darkness with muscle this time.
I would say the one thing is, not to get too sidetracked, but I do wish we saw more of like an in-person kind of evaluation of how Barry's been handling everything. Because I mean, we did get, some details from Control and a few of those email chains, but it was just because like Alice's role was done so well. It really feels like you got months and months of kind of her aftermath with the FBC. Yeah.
So to your question, initially, that's how they handled the story of Emil Hartman. His story was established in Alan Wake, and then they really concluded his life in Control. And so I think right there, it's like, I think that was a pretty decent handling of giving Alan Wake 1 and its DLCs and even American Nightmare like a bit of an epilogue to really just tie up that chapter and move on to the events of Alan Wake 2. But I think that we're going to see more and more of that. I can't say for sure about Barry. Like, my initial thoughts were, I wouldn't have been surprised, saying this months and months and months ago. I was just under the impression that he didn't really fit in with the tone of the game as it was being advertised. So I didn't really see how much they could fit in, like, his particular sort of brand of comedic relief in the world that I was seeing in the trailers and stuff. And I guess that turned out to be, the route they went. Who knows if he'll show up in the DLCs, but...
Oh, I agree with that. I think, it would have been weird to see him in there.
Yeah, I wasn't shocked to not see him. But I also really think that it's a strong possibility that Control 2 will include more of Tim Breaker if they continue with this character, because on his whiteboard at one point in the game, he mentions, looking for the redheaded woman, who obviously this is unconfirmed, but I think it's pretty apparent that that's Jesse Faden, because he talks about experiencing these different worlds and different lives and these different realities, and he's sometimes a different person with a different name, but it's still him, and people he knows are there. And I think that's as blatant of a reference to Quantum Break as they could legally make. And so it does seem like if he's searching for the redheaded woman, it would be great to see Beth and Jack Joyce, alternate versions of these characters, reunite in Control 2. It feels like a real fan service moment, because the end of Quantum Break, he says I'll come back for you, and if that could come true through a different series even, I think Remedy's probably going to seize that in some way. And we have Dylan, who's also, Dylan was also in Quantum Break, and Mr. Door is kind of the connecting tissue between those games as well, where Mr. Door and Dylan have interacted, and Mr. Door is clearly based on Martin Hatch. So it's just, Control 2 is kind of primed to be a full reunion of the Quantum Break cast. Well, the core cast, not everybody.
That would be interesting to see, for sure. And I have full faith that they'll execute it with panache.
Yeah, they're tactful about the stuff that could just be. It could be very cheesy if it wasn't handled right.
Yeah, definitely.
Next up, we have a message from Ambien, who on Twitter asked, "What was the meaning of the poems we find at the end of each murder site, and how did it affect the story?" So, as you play the game, you do run into these big poems. They're just written on different walls. It's like a continuing piece throughout the game. You see more and more of it as it goes on. I have some ideas on this, but I'm curious what you guys think. Is there any kind of initial insights or thoughts on this poem?
And that was your friends will... I can't remember the words exactly, but I know that your friends will meet them when you're gone.
That's in there, yeah.
Which, to this day, still is puzzling me, because, you could dive down a rabbit hole in this one.
Let me put my tinfoil hat on for this one.
Please do.
So you remember near the end of the base game where Alice and Alan from the future are basically resonating back into the story saying, hey, this is a detail you're going to need to do. They were actually kind of almost hand feeding breadcrumbs, kind of similar to what Thomas Zane did in the first game for you. When I had my initial playthrough, I was always under the impression that in some point in the future, Alan himself, or even potentially Mr. Door, is taking care of putting these specific details in for whatever reason we don't know. And if anything, that's kind of what makes it so difficult to really pinpoint what to actually say is reality with this narrative, just because at least as it's portrayed, Mr. Door is someone that does have the ability to see beyond way more realities than anybody else.
All right, we're going with time travel, right?
Yeah, wormholes, time travel. I think it's the easiest way to define it.
There's one particular thing that Alice says during you get the post game credits scene, which is made my jaw hit the floor a little bit. But she says that you're almost there, clearly being prepped for something. So she must know to some extent what's going to happen, which is why, time travel seems like quite a plausible theory at this point. But then we're creating some sort of Ouroboros situation, like I say, the spiral eventually turning into and looping back to the beginning, or not. But sorry, I'm diverging massively here, and this is,
I welcome it. It's good.
Yeah. But the whole your friends will meet him when you're gone thing, which was originally said obviously at the end of the first Alan Wake anyway,
it was Thomas Zane that said it, right?
That's the confusing thing, right? Because it was Thomas Zane, or this is another thing that we has it's sort of, never really truly been confirmed, but Thomas Zane at that point was technically the Bright Presence, right?
In the script and in the subtitles and everything, that character is only ever referred to as the Diver.
Yeah. Which is another confusing fact, which at some point I should imagine will need another conversation. But if he said your friends will meet him when you're gone, right, that implies that he was created by him. But was he created by him in the future? Or not? Or at the time? There's a lot to think about with it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Yeah, in case anyone isn't aware, there is like some text in Alan Wake 2 that basically says, the dark place and the art created there can affect previous events. It can retroactively change things, and one example of that is how at the end of the game, Saga uses the clicker to manifest and to summon Alan Wake, but she summons him in the past, and that's how they first meet at the end of the first overlap. And there are other examples of that sort of thing being alluded to throughout the game, but the full kind of comprehension of how that works and when it happens and everything is like so murky to me right now. I'm not sure if it's even something that has definitive rules. Like, Remedy's been really good to us in some games with giving us pretty clinical, straightforward explanations of how certain mechanics of the Dark Place work. And just as, for myself, as I try to think about theories and stuff, the thing I'm most focused on is, like, what do we know are the facts? Like, what mechanics can we reliably see, patterns and repetitions, and which things have been explicitly stated, and then kind of, work on the wild theory crafting from there. But the whole time travel, time affecting past and present, when did it happen stuff is like, just makes my head spin right now.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I pose a question for you guys? Because I'm actually curious your thoughts on this one.
Please.
So it's in the second half of Alan's journey when he gets into and meets Thomas Zane again. It's in the video where he goes to shoot Thomas Zane, and eventually it does the weird like Control AWE kind of split where like the roles are shifting back and forth, and it makes totally perfect sense. In my immediate playthrough, I was curious how much that like film, because at the end it's shown that like Thomas Zane is like, oh, that's brilliant art. He's like wiping his head off. Like, it almost made me think like, do you think that has any correlation with the light bullet you get at the end of the game? Because I've been debating with a few of my friends that have played it, like, to what extent is Thomas Zane still, like, inherently trying to, like, assist with Alan's journey? Because at least with Mr. Door's line, where he tells Alan, like, look, so many people are trying to help you, like, it sounded so, there was so much, like, belief and confirmation in that, like, it almost makes me think, like, yeah, Thomas Zane, he might be a little twisted in the dark place, but he has his own means.
Is that even Thomas Zane? That and I always refer back. I know this has never been exclusively confirmed outside that blog, but as far as that blog stated, and that's that House of Dreams blogspot, Thomas Zane, his soul or essence per se, actually went down to a separate, smaller baby universe to live with Barbara Jagger. So technically, the only thing that's left existing at the top now is this Bright Presence. But then, once again, obviously they're not. He's still referred to as Thomas Zane, and is that a retcon? I don't know. It's something to think about for sure. But whatever is happening, he's definitely pointing Alan in the right direction, giving him, like say, getting shot in the head, and maybe he was leading him to that in the first place. So, he towards the end of the game, he gets the idea, oh, maybe I need to shoot myself in the head to,
That's actually brilliant, because the whole time you're looking for echoes to give you inspiration. So if that's the case, then yeah, I mean that theory kind of checks out.
Yeah, I agree with all that. But also, I think Nick, you said, is that even Thomas Zane? It's so. Sometimes he's Tom, sometimes he's Thomas, and I feel like it's often different when referred to one or the other. And also, there was the Finnish spelling of his last name. This is something I'm really still chewing on, because I'm still trying to absorb as much as I can. And I know that we're going to learn a lot more in the New Game Plus, but I really question if we understand anything about the identity of Zane or Wake in a sort of like really tangible way. It just seems like their identities are so interchangeable in different contexts, just depending on who which characters you're talking to, and which time, which scenario, which area of the games, and everything. It's just every perspective. It could be Zane, it could be Wake, it could be Zane the filmmaker, it could be Zane the poet, it could be Zane the diver. It's not something I'm totally able to make sense of at the moment, but the more we see, the more I do start to notice some patterns, and I do wonder if one of these characters is just a manifestation of Alan's writing, and not necessarily the Thomas Zane that dove into the dark place and is still trying to escape. I'm not sure that that's even still the same person, because if again, like Nick said, if that blog is correct, then Zane himself, rather than ascending out of the dark place, chose to descend deeper into a sort of pocket universe inside of it, and it would seem that escape wasn't his desire. So if this version of Zane that we see is desiring to escape, that says to me that's more of a reflection of Alan's desires than anything else, and is possibly just, somehow part of Alan's art or psyche or something manifesting itself. But I don't know for sure. But I do also want to loop back around real quick and just mention these poems specifically. I do believe that the source of the poem is an Alex Casey novel. There's a Casey novel you can see in the game. You can see a page of it, and certain words on the page have been blacked out so that the text reveals a new sentence. It's just kind of like I can't remember the name of the technique right now, but the poem matches the words on that page, that Alex Casey novel, and have been like, that page is recontextualized over and over and over, which creates the different iterations of that poem. So I'm not sure who's writing it, but as a source text, they're using an Alex Casey novel, and what that means from there, I don't know. But that's the one piece of like concrete evidence I'm able to hang on to.
That makes sense.
It's hard to say how much of what we're seeing too is just it is just Alex Casey, like the novels, like even in the Visions from Alan Wake Remastered, he talked about being inspired by Alex Casey novels and having ideas from them kind of lingering in the dark place. So hard to say much concretely, but there is a little bit of evidence pointing toward someone's using Casey as an inspiration for that poem. But who's writing it? Who's putting it on the walls? Why is it there? What does it mean? I can't tell you right now, if ever.
I think at this point, where the world that Alan is seeing is just everything that he's done, written. So it's just going to be a mishmash of his thoughts and his scrambled thoughts at this point, because even he in Alan Wake 2, while you're playing, doesn't really truly know what's going on. It's just he knows he's writing over and over and over again, making edits and changing things, and it's shaped the world around him, and as a result you're seeing text, pages, and echoes and all sorts of other things, and it's all bleeding into one. He seems to have never escaped that that ability to I was going to say tidy everything up, but he's never able to do it.
he should probably do some work with Ati. He seems to be doing a pretty great job.
I'm still I'm on the fence about him. I don't understand his role still.
So total sidestep on that, but it kind of like it does kind of bring Ati in. The one thing I really appreciated from the first game as well as the second, like, have you guys ever like stopped to kind of think about like how much each individual person is trying to influence Alan's writing, whether it's for, you know, good, bad, indifference, if they even openly know that they are? Because in the first game you had Emil Hartman, Alice was his muse, Barbara Jagger, who was, you know, the Dark Presence, Mr. Scratch. Now we have, you know, the FBC who's trying to do the same thing, learning how to write archetypes and kind of trigger the dark place, so to speak. You know, you have it's just it seems like no matter where Alan goes, someone else is trying to manifest some form of like reality from him.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely picked up on that, but didn't really think about the kind of totality of it and how it is being pulled in so many different directions. The all that stuff with the FBC too is I know that's going to be a focus of you know, later additions to the game, and it's very interesting to think about getting a deeper perspective into what the FBC wants to accomplish and what they think of the dark place and the art created there, because even in that first game, like I always wanted to know more about like what was Hartman really trying to do. Like, I know he wanted to use the writers and the artists and use it somewhat selfishly, but we don't really ever get like a clear indication of what Hartman's sort of like end game was for using the dark place.
No, he never out and out said, you know, like, for instance, I want to create a utopia, or I want ultimate power and control over everything. He never really said any of that, I don't think.
He was a heavy narcissist, though, so I could see that.
Yeah.
The only thing we ever got, and I might be overlooking this or looking too deep into this, Ma in the first game says something along the lines of, you know, you're going to help us create something like wonderful and terrible, as if they wanted to summon the dark presence and fully unleash it into reality. Like, that's, I know I'm kind of making a jump in logic there, but it was just so strange that he would use that kind of language, and then knowing that Hartman knew stuff about the dark place, but it was kind of guarded how much he really understood. And I think that it'll be interesting, you know, like I'm trying to say, when we learn more about what the FBC is doing, it'll just be really nice to get a deeper perspective on someone other than Alan getting deeper into the dark place. Same with Alice. I'm really excited to learn more about, you know, how is she able to maintain composure like she has been.
Alan's not very grounded. And before he entered the dark place, I don't think Alan was very grounded, right? He was struggling with his mental health, and as a result, in the dark place, that became what's the word I'm looking for? It just expanded on that and blew it up, if you will. And Alice was a lot more composed and in control of her emotions, and possibly went in with a better headspace, which in turn enabled her to be a bit more in control of the dark place. Who knows? But that's, if I had to guess, that would be my guess. Did you finish the doll puzzles? Did you do all the doll puzzles in Alan Wake 2 with Saga?
Yeah, I did.
So you get that interesting, because they're experimenting. The FBC are clearly experimenting, trying to sort of find out how the dark place, you know, manifests.
Do you mean the one where it's like the FBC agent like accidentally sends himself to the dark place?
Yes. I thought that was great. Yeah, he tried to send Saga there and sent himself by accident, which was quite funny.
I like to think that maybe he went to the same place that our guy that was staring at the fridge did, because I just want him to be alive from Control.
It would be nice. I'm not sure if he made it, though. What was kind of unclear to me is, was that researcher cut off from the headquarters like everyone else was?
I don't think it was mentioned.
I kind of just insinuated that, like, he was, you know, kind of similar to, like, Estevez. They were just, you have these smaller groups that unfortunately just, you know, they have to just continue what they were doing regardless of whatever the experiment was.
Yeah. That's another question that I got from a lot of people, was just kind of asking, like, is the FBC still on lockdown? Because we know what the situation was at the end of the Foundation, but if Estevez is talking about how, you know, resources are still kind of limited from headquarters and things are kind of cut off, it's kind of unclear to me what's going on at the oldest house, and I don't believe there's too much insight into that. Did you guys notice anything?
No, I think they're keeping it fairly ambiguous for now, just until we get the Lake House DLC. I think we'll learn a lot more there, which I'm absolutely fine with. Like, I think the beauty of Alan Wake is its ability to make you sit there and cook in your own head about what's happening. So it leaves you with a mystery, and after a time, it will be like, hey, they'll come out and explain it with a bit more DLC or something. So yeah, I think for now it's meant to be ambiguous in that respect, but I'm pretty sure it will get covered sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's my hope. And yeah, totally. I love sort of the game leaves you with something to chew on, and hearing all the different perspectives, and you know, it's very interesting to me to play the game, have my own questions, and then talk to other people who were looking at it from a completely different perspective and got, you know, just as much out of it. That's a rare ability as a storyteller. But I got one last question I want to mention here. This is from Tariq Musa on Twitter. Asked, I'm pretty sure Door is Saga's dad. How did he become Door? What is his role and relationship to Alan?
I 100% also think this.
It's so funny because I remember playing the scene for the first time, and the moment, like, he just dropped to Alan, like, you're keeping somebody from me. I never thought about it, but I, like, instantaneously was like, oh yeah, that's definitely Saga's dad. Which would kind of explain, like, the old gods, they go back into the lake, and I almost wonder if, like, they're going back to, I don't want to say make amends, but they definitely have, like, unfinished business with Mr. Door.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, to attack each part of this, yeah, the vast consensus is Door is Saga's father. There's a lot of evidence that aligns with that, you know, assumption. And I do think that it will be more explicitly stated. As to how did he become Door, that's something that I don't really understand quite yet. But just to give like a little, you know, of my own insight here, the character is based on Martin Hatch from Quantum Break, who himself became an entity very similar to Door, who kind of had the power to really just transcend time and space and could exist in all realities at once, and that would normally tear someone apart, but he seemed to have it largely under control. And his powers came from sounds so ridiculous as I say it. His powers came from a natural time machine that he found while exploring a cave. But he makes vague mention of this in a letter that's found at the end of the game. And so some sort of naturally occurring time machine, he interacted with it. I'm assuming it's some sort of, you know, elemental energy force that he, you know, found. And it's not even clear, like, when in time he encountered that and what his true form is. Is he, you know, an adult male that looks generally the way he looks and that's his body, or is he just using that form? It's all left very unclear, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a similar sort of origin story for Mr. Door, where he came in contact with something that altered him, and is that thing the dark place?
I had a different theory for him. Just so, and this goes back to Alan Wake's American Nightmare now, where Scratch is talking to Alan through the TV and mentioning that there are different entities in the dark place, and obviously if you take that with the context of Control as well and the Hiss and all these, it stands to reason that there is multiple dimensions outside of the ones we've seen already that have different higher powers. And in my head, Mr. Door is just one of those higher powers from another dimension, happening to visit. I'm going to call it Earth 616 just for ease of access. But he was visiting, and during that time happened to father a child, and decided to go off and explore the multiverse again, and now wants to come back. But I don't know. It's just an idea. Whether or not it turns out that way, who knows?
Yeah, I think there's weight to that for sure. We do know that there are multiple entities, and they do seem to have, I don't know how to put this, like society and hierarchy and wars and everything. Like, we know the dark versus light kind of war that is referenced now in Wake, but it seems like also in Control with like the board and the former. I guess I mean to say there's like allegiances, and it kind of seems like Door is presented, just from the text in the game, is presented as someone who's kind of more of a rogue agent, not really doesn't seem like he has much of an allegiance to any one faction or any other force we've been introduced to in the game, but is extremely powerful nonetheless. Yeah, I like the idea of him being a visiting entity to Earth. That's a really cool idea.
We're going to see more of him for sure.
Yeah, let me ask you guys this: how do you feel about when he immediately I'm assuming it was him. He blanked Tim Breaker out of Bright Falls in the first chapter. Do you have any ideas why? I mean, it's still vague, but why specifically would he not want Saga to have that information? It's almost like he wanted to guide her through that journey specifically.
But I think that is explained a little later on, isn't it? There, because he does. Tim Breaker gives Saga the page, but only at the specific moment that she needs it. As far as I was aware, that's why. Because Tim Breaker was about to give her that page, but then, she didn't need that information at the time. But
it's hard because we don't have the concrete information, but it's fun to think why does Door want this to play out the way he does? And it's not like he's super serious 24/7. I mean, the guy had that beautiful what was it, that musical number with Alan. He's willing to have fun in the dark place too.
Yeah, he even mentions I was willing to play along for a while. I've gone back and forth on all this quite a bit. There is a manuscript page that mentions Tim Breaker being sort of an unwilling protege or disciple of Mr. Door. Mr. Door is almost kind of testing him and maybe grooming him for some sort of, I don't know, to pass on something to him. Which is also kind of the dynamic that the two characters have in Quantum Break. At the end of the game, and I know these are two, unrelated stories, but just in terms of these characters kind of fulfilling different archetypes, the end of the game leaves you with the choice of do you trust Martin Hatch, or do you go forward on kind of, your own path, because he wants to kind of bring you in on board with his operation. And the game just ends on a cliffhanger with, what was that choice? But it seems like there's a similar dynamic here between Breaker and Door, where Door is definitely leading Breaker towards something, but why he flashed him out at that particular moment, it seemed like maybe Door just was willing to play along with Alan's story up into a certain point. And that was kind of his role in that. But I don't know.
It's definitely a head scratcher for sure. Excuse the pun, sorry. Couldn't help myself.
So what is his role in relationship to Alan? That's still very unclear what the totality of it is. I think in the New Game Plus, we're going to learn a lot more about, what Door is doing, why he's willing to play along with Alan and sort of indulge these things. But, he says at the end of the game, like, next time we meet, it's going to be different. And it's very foreboding. And it's hard to tell, it seems like he's just kind of sick of Alan's shit and wants to, kind of like bring things to a conclusion with him. But what that really means, there's a lot of different ways to chew on it. It's also kind of like, it's unclear to me if Saga's powers as a seer appear to have been like passed down genetically. Do you guys get that impression?
I mean, it's entirely possible. Are they, I mean, in this sense, are they all para-utilitarians or have abilities, or, it's something that's not really been confirmed.
Yeah. It's something I've been trying to, and maybe this is just more questions, we can kind of leave this on, but it seems like the Anderson brothers received their powers through their experimentation with the lake. But it seems like Saga was possibly born with those powers. And if so, then I would assume they came down from Door, and that again leads, what is the source of Door's power? How did he become this person who kind of stands between worlds? I'm dying to know.
Yeah. I'm still pretty certain he's just an all-powerful entity from another dimension that we have yet to discover. That's my best guess.
I think that I feel very similarly. I like that idea. He doesn't strike me as someone who, if he disappeared in 1988, it doesn't seem like he would amass that much power and wisdom over the course of 35 years in the Dark Place. Seeing as how, Alan in the Dark Place and other people, like, it seems like he's able to freely move around and is much more of an overseer, which it just strikes me as like an older type of wisdom and power, more, possibly ancient even.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the classic knowledge versus wisdom.
Yeah, totally. Well, that is all the questions I have today. I feel like we're still... I know people are enjoying these kinds of videos and it's fun to talk about stuff. I'm sorry if it's kind of like, I didn't learn anything. It's the intention more is to have the discussions and kind of try to learn, what questions should be being asked and where should we look at this information and kind of, I think mostly it's just to fucking have fun with it. But
I think it's really hard at the minute because Alan Wake 2 is so fresh, right? So really all we've got to go on is theories and things we might have picked up on, but otherwise there's not much out there at the minute. And yeah, like I said earlier, I think we're just meant to cook right now and see what comes up.
Yeah, it's kind of, that's just brilliant game design though, right? Like the best games tend to really get you into the mindset of the character. So like imagine Alan Wake sitting in a room for 13 years and this is how his brain's operating.
Yeah, totally.
And he forgets everything every single time he even gets anywhere.
Which is, in effect the game has had on me at points, right? I noticed I'd be so caught up in whatever new scenario I was in, I'd forget how it was. I was so immersed, I'd forget how it was linked to other parts of the game. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, I need to like, kind of like zoom out and see the bigger picture sometimes. But it's so easy to get lost in any one aspect of it. Anyway, that's it for now. Hopefully this just at least gives people something to chew on. I just think it's very funny. I got a bunch of comments being like, this was good, but like now I'm even more confused on some of these types of videos. So deal with it. So thank you both for coming on and talking. Anything else you want to share before we head out of here?
No, I mean, thank you for having us on, man. It was great talking. I guess kind of the one thing I kind of just want to leave off on is, it's such a great game. I think probably I like looking at games thematically and like seeing the first game, the whole light versus darkness, being a writer that was trying to basically uncover a truth that was just so obscured. Seeing how like in the second game, Alan Wake, like near the end of the experience, kind of overcomes that fear of all this fiction in the world, and like he's willing and actually has like direction again. It was such a beautiful moment to see after waiting like almost 13 years. It feels like this game kind of had the BioShock effect to me. Like, it feels like something where more studios aren't going to just try to replicate, but like they're going to take parts away from this game. So I think we'll be talking about it for quite a long time.
Echoing that, thanks for having me on. It's great to get on and talk about Alan Wake. And yeah, personally, Alan Wake has been my game of the year. I've played a lot of games this year, and one I didn't think anything would top some of the other stuff I'd played earlier on, but Alan Wake had me from the moment it started, and at the end of it, it had me questioning absolutely everything I thought I knew. That to me is the mark of a fantastic video game, and even better is that this is the first game in a very long time that actually made me jump. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. All right. Well, hey, thanks for sticking around and watching this. We got plenty more stuff like this on the channel if you want to check it out. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. And please check out these other channels as well, Cookies and Cream and Deep Dives, 2 awesome channels that deserve your attention. And until next time, see ya.